The Bible tells us that God is love. Yes, God is love. But because of human sufferings and the uncertainty of future life in the minds of many people, they find it difficult to grasp the reality of this great truth. In this film presentation, we will see how an understanding of the teachings of the Bible concerning death and the hereafter confirms the great fact that God is love. As the program opens, we find an earnest church worker seeking information on the subject of death from his one-time college professor.
Oh, it's good to see you again, George. Here, take your coat off. Sit down. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you. And you're looking better than you did last time I saw you.
Thanks. That's encouraging. Come on, sit down. Can I get you a cup of coffee?
No, thanks, Professor. As you know, I'm always glad to see you, Professor Edwards, but this is more than a social call.
Oh?
Remember last time when I called on you, I was looking for some help on the subject of death. I just left the home of an unbelieving woman who seemed angered at the idea that God is love.
On account, I suppose, of the traditional idea of what happens to unbelievers after death?
Well, largely that. And, of course, she's experienced more than the normal amount of suffering and hardship in her life. She just can't reconcile that with the idea that God is love, especially if she's to be further punished after she dies.
That's quite understandable.
Well, when I called on you the last time, you did help me. You gave me a booklet which you said a friend of yours had given you. You suggested that I read it carefully and compare it with the Bible, which I did.
And what was the result?
Well, it opened up a whole new vista of thought for me. Tell me, did you read the booklet before you gave it to me?
Yes, George, I did in a casual sort of way. Now, as I remember, the booklet called attention to many texts of the Bible which indicate that the dead are asleep and will be awakened from the sleep of death in the resurrection.
Well, I can see you read the book all right. And as you know, the Apostle Paul refers to Christians who die as being asleep in death. And he says that unless they are raised from the dead, they have perished.
That's true. You see, George, I've done quite a lot of research on this point, and I find that many outstanding men of the church throughout the centuries agreed with what the Bible teaches on this subject. William Tyndale, translator of the first printed English Bible, is one of these. No, I could mention many others.
Why didn't you tell me about this when I visited you the last time?
Well, I thought it might be better to give you that little booklet and have you look it up for yourself. Besides, George, there is another side to this question. And for myself, at my age, I'm a little hesitant about giving up my traditional understanding.
Well, I don't mind telling you I've discovered there is another side to the question. Well, that's why I'm here now. I thought perhaps you could help me.
I certainly wish I could. But, you see, when a person has held certain views for practically a whole lifetime, it isn't easy to change. Now, as I said, there seems to be another side to the question. For example, Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "This day shalt thou be with me in paradise." This would seem to indicate that the thief did not fall asleep in death, but was whisked off to paradise on the very day that he seemed to die.
Well, and as you no doubt know, Professor, there are other texts in the Scriptures which seem to refute the idea that death is like a sleep from which there will be an awakening in the resurrection.
Yes, I know that. I'm afraid, George, that I can't be very much help to you.
I'm sorry. You know, I'd like to believe that Lazarus was asleep in death, as Jesus said he was. The Bible said that Abraham slept with his fathers. I'd like to believe that, too. and then follow through with the Bible's assurances that these shall be raised from the dead to enjoy the restored blessings of paradise here on earth. And that this is true for all, because Jesus tasted death for all.
In other words, you'd like to believe that the Bible is not contradictory. Wait a minute, George. I just had an idea. The gentleman who gave me that booklet lives not far from here, and I've often thought of calling him and asking him to come over for a little talk. Maybe this is the time. Perhaps he can help us, perhaps he can't, but in any case, it won't do any harm to try. Let me see, his name was Woodworth, Norman Woodworth. I'm glad you could come over, Mr. Woodworth.
Well, I must say I was a little surprised to get your phone call. I hope there's nothing seriously wrong.
Oh, nothing at all. We thought that perhaps you could be of some help to us on a certain topic of the Bible. You see, my friend here, Mr. Thomas, in his work for the church, comes into contact at times with those who are very ill and some who are not expected to live very long. And naturally, he's been confronted with the age-old question, what is death?
You see, Mr. Woodworth, in seeking to console those who are facing the tragic experience of death, I've found that the usual answers very often seem to be weak and meaningless.
I can understand how that can be.
Some time ago, Mr. Thomas came to me particularly concerned over his failure to give the needed comfort in certain instances. And I gave him that booklet that you left with me, the one entitled Life After Death.
Yes, I remember that booklet. And did you find it of any help, Mr. Thomas?
Well, yes. The idea that death is like a sleep from which there is an awakening appeals to me. And I find that there's much in the Bible to support this view. But now I am confronted with the fact that there are certain statements in the Bible which seem to contradict it.
Yes, and I'm afraid that I haven't been very much help to Mr. Thomas. We thought maybe you could give us some answers.
Well, certainly I appreciate your thinking of me, but I'm just a student of the Bible like yourselves. However, if talking over the points will help, I'll be glad to cooperate.
Well, to begin with, there's the statement which Jesus made to the thief on the cross. Today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Now, you see, Mr. Woodworth, if that thief went to paradise the day he died, it means that he didn't fall asleep in death at all, and that it was merely his outward shell or body that died, and that the real person continued to live.
Which would mean that what Jesus said to the thief on the cross would contradict other statements in the Bible, would it not?
Well, of course, we have to rule out the idea that the Bible is contradictory. The Bible clearly teaches that death is like a sleep from which there will be an awakening. This is one of the most clearly defined truths set forth in the Bible. And I'm sure that everything else in the Bible harmonizes with this when properly understood.
I'm sure that's what we'd all like to believe. But let me read you the account in which Jesus' promise to the thief appears. It's found in the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 23. Now I'll read you verses 42 and 43. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise.
There you are, Mr. Woodworth. That puts the case squarely before us. If that thief went to paradise the very day he died, how could we say that he fell asleep in death and thus became unconscious?
Well, if that is what Jesus meant, then the account itself is contradictory.
How come, Mr. Woodworth?
Take notice that the thief requested to be remembered when Jesus came into his kingdom. Then Jesus began his reply by the expression, verily, meaning, so be it. You will be remembered when I come into my kingdom. Your request will be granted. You will be with me in paradise. Now, did Jesus come into his kingdom the day he was crucified?
Well, I think that calls for a little information concerning the kingdom of Christ.
It is the kingdom promised in the Old Testament. Isaiah wrote that of the increase of Christ's government there would be no end. This kingdom was not established and ruling in the world the day Jesus died, and therefore the thief could not have been remembered in it.
But then, why did Jesus refer to paradise when he assured the thief that he would be remembered in his kingdom?
Because the purpose of Christ's rulership is to reestablish paradise conditions throughout the earth. The word paradise simply means a garden. The original paradise was the Garden of Eden, with its perfect conditions of health and life and peace with God, which existed before our first parents transgressed God's law. As a result of this transgression, paradise was lost.
Well, actually, then, paradise did not exist in Jesus' day, meaning that there was no paradise to which the thief could then go.
That's just the point.
But remember, Mr. Woodworth, Jesus said to the thief, "This day shalt thou be with me in paradise."
Well, let me quote what Jesus really said. "Verily I say unto you today, thou shalt be with me in paradise." You see, I merely changed the position of the comma, but it gives the statement an entirely different meaning.
Yes, but do you have the right to do that?
Oh, certainly. There was no punctuation in the original manuscripts of the Bible. In fact, punctuation was not invented until centuries after the Bible was written. Translators have used punctuation to make the texts of the Bible more understandable, and in most instances have done a good job. But in this instance, in order to accommodate their own theory, they put the comma in the wrong place and made it appear that Jesus and the thief went to paradise that very day, when in reality, paradise did not then even exist.
Then by changing the position of the comma, it makes Jesus emphasize the day he made the promise. "Verily I say unto thee today." Now, why would Jesus wish to emphasize the day he made the promise to the thief?
I think the reason is obvious. The inscription over Jesus' cross was, "This is the King of the Jews." Perhaps this was all the thief knew about Christ's kingdom. And he asked Jesus to remember him when he came into his kingdom. Just then, Jesus was being crucified. From the human standpoint, it seemed impossible that he would ever come into a kingdom. But Jesus knew that he would be raised from the dead, and that at his second advent would establish a kingdom. So he said to the thief, "Today, even though I'm now being crucified, I will have a kingdom. You will be blessed in my kingdom. You will be with me in paradise." As I said, Christ's kingdom will restore the lost earthly paradise.
And that brings us right back to the hope of the resurrection of the dead. That thief will have to be raised from the dead in order to enjoy the blessings of the restored paradise.
That's right. Jesus was raised from the dead and was highly exalted to the divine nature. His faithful followers are raised from the dead in what the Bible describes as the first resurrection. These are exalted to the heavenly realm with Jesus and will live and reign with him in his kingdom. Also, of course, there is the general resurrection of all the dead.
And is it your thought that those who are brought forth in the general resurrection will simply be restored to human life?
That's what the Bible clearly teaches. If they accept the provisions of life made for them through the redemptive work of Christ and obey the laws of Christ's kingdom, they will be restored to perfection of human life and will live forever. The period in which this great work is accomplished is described in the Bible as times of restitution of all things. And the Apostle Peter informs us that it has been foretold by God's holy prophets since the world began.
Well, Mr. Woodworth, I certainly do appreciate the way you've cleared up the problem or the difficulty of the thief on the cross. There are other questions I would like to ask, but I do realize that the Word of God must be harmonious. And I will continue to rejoice in the great hope of the resurrection of the dead.
I'll be glad to discuss further points with you anytime.
Well, you're both welcome to stay here now. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm enjoying this very much.
Well, I can't. I have to make another call. However, I will be making it with greater assurance than ever that God is truly love. Thank you, Professor Edwards.
Welcome, George, and good to see you.
And Mr. Woodworth?
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Again, it was very nice of you to come over, Mr. Woodward.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Find your way out, George?
Yes, surely. Thanks, Professor.
Yes, come in.
Mrs. Rubello?
Come in.
Do you remember me, Mrs. Rubello?
Yes, I remember you.
I had difficulty finding you. I went to your old address, and you weren't there, and nobody seemed to know where you'd gone.
I'm sorry.
Is everything all right? Mrs. Rubello, the church is perfectly willing to continue sending you financial aid. I didn't come here today to talk about that, though, although I will report your new address. I came today because I thought I could help you in another way.
Help me, did you say?
Yes.
Help me. It doesn't matter now.
I don't understand.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't want any help, and the whole thing is too late.
No, you don't understand, Mrs. Rubello. It's not too late for what I have in mind.
Not too late. For you to help me. Oh, that's good. What kind of help have you got in mind?
Well, you remember when we talked before, we talked about God and religion, and you told me because of all the suffering and trouble in your life, you didn't believe in God.
I still don't believe. Were you there on the day I was born and my mother died? I never knew my mother. But my brother and my sister, they told me that she was stupid.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't mean that.
Well, yes, they meant it. She was stupid. She believed in my father. And he didn't care about her. I mean, he never gave her enough money, although there was plenty around for him. And no matter what happened, she would say, God is love. She told them they should remember that all their lives.
God is love, Mrs. Rubello.
God is love. Well, where was this God of love when my brother and sister both died of tuberculosis before they were 20? And my other brother was sent to prison for something he didn't do. Oh, I remember our last discussion. You said then God is love. But when I asked you what would happen to me if I died without believing in God, you were ashamed to tell me. You think I can forget that?
I don't understand, Mrs. Rubello. Before, we talked like we were good friends. Now you seem angry with me.
Yes, I'm angry. I want to be left alone in my disbelief. Look. My life is nothing. Now, there's no point pretending it's something when it's nothing. And I don't see any point in lying to yourself.
Mrs. Rubello, you recall our former conversation so well. Perhaps you'll remember that I admitted that I might be wrong in my understanding that God continues to punish the unbelievers after they die.
You can be sure I remember that. You remember saying you would keep an open mind on that subject. Well, did you?
Yes, I did. And you also indicated that you would do the same with regard to your unbelief. Did you do that?
Perhaps. In some small degree.
Wonderful. In that case, I am glad I came. Because a bit of light has entered through that opening I left in my mind, Mrs. Rubello. And I'm more convinced than ever that God is love.
Oh, you make me mad.
Mad?
Yes, mad. You know, the last time you were here, you started me hoping. Now, well, that's dead, and I prefer that it remain dead.
What did you hope, Mrs. Rebello?
Well, you know, many years ago, or a few years ago, somebody spoke to me about God, and I became a believer, and for a while I was happy, but, well, the contradictions started to pile up, and I lost my belief. I lost my hope. And then you came and spoke to me, and again there was a faint glimmer of hope, and now that's dead. And, well, I'm afraid to listen to you again, because the truth is that I'm too tired to even try again.
Mrs. Rebello, real hope can give you the courage and the strength to go on.
Real hope.
Yes.
Real hope. What is real hope anyway?
Hope that is based on reason and understanding. Your life matters to you, Mrs. Rebello. And it matters to the great and loving God of the universe. You've had a lot of suffering in your life. Almost nothing but suffering. And to understand this, you must see it from God's standpoint. Do you understand?
No, I don't understand.
Well, of course, we think pain is terrible. And we're right. But let me ask you a question. You've had a lot of suffering in your life. But if you could be assured that your suffering would end tomorrow, you'd experience no more pain of mind or body, well, and under those circumstances, would you be too concerned over what's happening today?
Are you speaking about death? Are you trying to tell me that if I don't believe in God, I won't go to heaven, but I'll go to that place where there is endless suffering?
No, Mrs. Rebello. I want you to imagine yourself as a human becoming well, with all the unpleasant circumstances of today being straightened out.
I can't even imagine something like that. In fact, I'm beginning to think you're just joking with me.
No, Mrs. Rebello, I've never been more serious in my life. And here's something else to imagine. You said you had never seen your mother. You will see your mother. And every situation in your life and in the life of your family, which has been so difficult, will be compensated for and straightened out.
What is this, some kind of magic you're trying to tell me about?
No, Mrs. Rebello. These are the great truths taught in the Bible, and I came to tell you about them. Isn't it wonderful to realize that your mother was right all along to insist that God is love?
Mr. Thomas, there's one question I would like to ask you. Now, what happens about death in this fantasy of yours? Now, we're all dying, remember?
Death is like a sleep from which there will be an awakening. And this is the great truth of the Bible, which I've learned since the last time we talked together.
Go on.
As you know, most of us suffer more or less through our lives. Some suffer today and are better tomorrow. Well, the Bible teaches us that there will be a happy tomorrow in which all the unpleasant circumstances of today will be forgotten, as they're replaced by the blessings of health and life provided by the love of God through the suffering and death of Jesus.
The Bible teaches that.
Yes, Mrs. Rebello. The Bible teaches us that there will be a day when death is no more, nor sorrow nor sighing. A day when there will be no more pain. A day when all the unhappiness of the present will be forgotten. A day when God will make all things new.
If I knew God was like that, could believe. I could love him. You're the first one who has told me this. Everybody has said, Mrs. Rebello, God is trying to teach you a lesson with all the suffering. And you better learn before you die to believe in God, or, too bad, all the suffering that you have experienced in this life will be nothing compared to life and suffering after death.
I know, Mrs. Rebello, but you see, we make God's love too narrow by placing on it our own false limits. When I called on you the last time, I had not yet discovered that mistake.
Well, it seems odd now, but when I was trying to be a believer, I would go to the gospel meetings and we would sing of Sweet By and By. And I concluded there that there would be no sweet by and by for me. Maybe there could be.
Not only for you, Mrs. Rebello, but for all suffering and dying humanity as well.
It's too good to be true.
Oh, it's not too good to be true. It's just what we should expect of a loving God.
Yes, God is love. And this reassuring truth is revealed in the plan of God as set forth in the Bible. And friends, the little book mentioned in this presentation, which proved to be such a great aid in the understanding of the Bible, is available to you free. It is entitled Life After Death. There is life beyond the grave. You will see your loved ones again. And these truths are clearly set forth in the little book, Life After Death.
To view the booklet online, visit www.dawnbible.com, or to receive a hard copy of the booklet by mail, send us your name and postal mailing address and ask for the booklet by name. The title of the booklet for this program is Life After Death. Send an email to dawnbible@aol.com. The booklet will be mailed to you free and without obligation. And now, goodbye, and may God bless you.